Hi, and welcome to Dollars and Making Sense, a weekly show about finance, money, and investing. I'm your host, Ray Treverson from OTG Capital. We are proudly sponsored by OTG Capital, a private debt investment trust. We are a wholesale investment trust, and because of the rules of the Community Radio Network and the Community Broadcasting Association of Australia, I need to let people know that we are sponsored by my own company so that there is transparency and no conflicts of interest or anything like that. So that's the paid promotion bit of it. But again, we are all about financial education. We are broadcast locally on Radio Northern Beaches and around Australia on the Community Radio Network, compliments of the Community Broadcasting Association of Australia. I'm really pleased to hear that we heard somebody in Noosa actually tracked down one of my previous people that was on the show and said, I actually heard you. So it's really nice to know that somebody's out there actually listening to the show. Thank you. We really appreciate it. It's nice to know that there's people out there in the big wide ether. So this week, I'm really pleased to welcome back to the microphone Jen Richardson. Jen is a financial planner. I don't want to take too much thunder around off you, Jen. Please tell us a little bit about who you are, what your qualifications are, and what you do from an educational perspective as well.
Sure. I'm actually an ex-financial planner. I gave up
my
my
apologies.
license last year, so we need to make that very clear. I'm an accountant of 40 years now. Let's not say that out too loud because that's a bit embarrassing, but I'm also a mortgage broker and, as I said, a former financial planner. I do a lot in the digital space now with financial coaching, financial education. I don't even know what I would call it, but teaching women in particular how to build their own financial wealth. And it was part of the reason that I did let my financial planning license go, because I wanted to do more of the coaching. And so on my site, jenrichardson.co, I do a female financial literacy program where I teach women how to get rid of the debt that they have in their life, build financial wealth so that they can live the life that they want to live, particularly in retirement.
Well, I'm really pleased that you're back on the show. We're going to do a lot more shows with Jen, ladies and gentlemen, because I really love her angle on financial education. You're very similar to somebody we've had on the show for many years, Philippa Hunt, and she is also big on educating women, predominantly middle-aged and older women, because that's where, unfortunately, a lot of financial abuse occurs, but sometimes it is also self-inflicted. So let's talk a little bit about some of this self-inflicted wounds, because I guess this subject is near and dear to my heart, because I actually buy and sell debt as part of what I do in my investment trust. But we're talking today, ladies and gentlemen, about debt. Now, I guess, Jen, why is debt such an important subject to you in what you do day by day?
Well, debt is something that is part of life, and I think when we take a very different approach to debt and realise that it's not the noose around our neck that we think it is, but so often we're told that, you've got to get rid of your debt, and there's some debt that you should never have got. There's also debt that is good. I don't know too many people that can go out and buy a house anymore without going into debt. But debt is one of those things that is part of life, but learning how to deal with it and learning how to put procedures in place so that it's not a debt that you drown in is particularly important. And, debt's one of those things that keeps people awake of the night. It is also one of those things that transfers your own net wealth to someone else, whether that be a bank, an individual, or somebody else. It's moving your own money across to them. And of course, when you move your wealth to somebody else, you don't have it to spend in retirement or to do the things that you want to be able to do. But, the thing that I find, Ray, is that the advent of social media and the advent of a lot more advertising is what has led a lot of people to think that they need to keep up with the Joneses. Marketing strategies are very good, and if you don't have the strategies in place, you do become a victim of it. And I think that we forget that in social media in particular, there's lots of smoke and mirrors. And, we see people that have these things in life and we think that we have to have them. But of course, we don't know what is behind where they're sitting. it's all very well to jump on social media and say, look how lovely my life is, but we don't know if they're having a meltdown in the background anyway. So
I must say, I want to pick up on something you said about good debt versus bad debt, because I can remember I had a gentleman on the show probably about 3-4 years ago now, really delving back into my memory banks here. But there are things like good debt and bad debt, and I think that it's worth sort of pursuing a little bit more. And ladies and gents, Jen's got a very good blog on her site. It's called Debt, and much of how to get out of debt and a simple plan to take control. And I think it's this element of control that I really like your focus on this, because it can be a head game, and you know, it's the old story about living rent free in your brain, you know, and that can end up happening with people, can't it?
Absolutely it does. And, you know, with everything in life, as humans, we like to have control. And when we don't have control of something, we have chaos. We have overwhelm. And overwhelm when it comes to debt is one of the things that I see. And because we look at the big number and we look at what we have left over every week, and we start to question ourselves, how do I get out of this situation that I'm in? And so that's where I always say a plan is what you need, because a plan gives you, as you say, that rent-free space in your head is then removed, because you have a strategy, you know where you're going. And of course, you know, everything that I do, I bring in my accounting background, where we always have, you know, a plan for everything, and we have monitoring and, you know, checking in with that plan to see if you're meeting your expectations, if you're still on track to do what you want to do. And if you don't have a plan on how to get out of debt or how to deal with the debt, then you've got no ability to check on your progress. And so that's the goal setting. You know, where do I want to be in 12 months' time? How much debt do I want to get rid of? And I find when people don't have that plan, not only is the chaos still going on in their head and the overwhelm that they're feeling every day, they actually end up in further and further debt, because there's, you know, they just feel that overwhelm. And, you know, Ray, as you probably know, dopamine is a huge thing in our lives, and dopamine is the happy drug, some people call it. And when you're feeling overwhelmed, your body's seeking something to actually make you feel really good. And of course, the easiest way to get a dopamine hit is shopping and anticipation. But, you know, as we know, dopamine isn't the reward for getting something, it's the anticipation of getting something.
Yes.
So when we go shopping, and, you know, I'm saying this from a female point of view, I'm saying it from a personal point of view, I know, but I also know that what's hitting me at the time. And so when we go shopping, it's the anticipation of what we might buy or what we might find or how good we're going to look when we wear that thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so we get the dopamine hit. And of course, once we buy it and we walk out of the shop, the dopamine doesn't exist anymore. And so we come thundering back down. And so if you've got something in place to manage that debt, you're not then going to become a victim to that dopamine, because you've got structure and you've got things in place so that you have a strategy on how to, I'm not going to say get out of debt, because getting out of debt shouldn't be the goal. It should be by the time we retire. But during our working life, getting out of debt isn't the ultimate goal, because good debt, as you touched on, is how we build our wealth if we have strategies in place. Bad debt and atrocious debt are the two that we need to avoid. And
I've not heard atrocious, I've just heard bad, but I'm glad we have some modicums of level of lousy debt. So fair enough. No, fair
I
call.
don't know that it is an official term, but it's one that I use with my clients all the time. You know, bad debt is bad, but then you have the, you know, the payday debt, you have the buy now, pay later debt, and all those things that are at ridiculous interest rates.
Yeah.
And some of those, and I know I can't say the product, but I'm sure you'll get what it is the, you know, funding in 24 hours for something that's gone wrong. That has an interest rate of something like 66% when you work it out. if you don't do it. And that's what I call the atrocious debt. And whilst I don't love bad debt, I would take bad debt over the atrocious debt any day.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. And again, it just reminds me of one of the very common idioms around debt and money and budgeting. Again, planning. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And I know it's very trite to say that, in such a manner, but it's so darn true. When I've stepped in, I'm not a financial planner, but I have had to step into family situations where people just don't know where to start. And the reason I like your little blog there is that, the first thing you're doing is getting into people's headspace and, trying to grasp with that. And I found myself in a roundabout way, virtually doing the same thing when I was helping some family members, out of financial difficulty and another one out of a gambling habit, which I'm happy to talk about because it's well behind us now. But, how you are able to grasp some really basic concepts and get into headspace, because I think that's really, really important. Sometimes I wonder, Jen, are you a psychologist rather than an educator when it comes to counseling people like this?
I always say in my accounting world anyway, we are more psychologists than anything else, because when people start talking numbers, it is, I don't know what your growing up was, but I grew up in a very quiet household. So I always talk about a quiet or a noisy household.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in a quiet household. So there was no arguments about money, but there was also no education around money. And I think, I grew up in that era where it was impolite to ask what people earned or impolite to ask how much something cost them. I think that has brought us all, and, even the younger ones, I've got children in their 20s, but I find that when people start talking about their money, they feel very naked. All of a sudden they're very exposed.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had people sitting opposite me that burst into tears. I've had people that you can just feel that overwhelm lifting because they've finally got somebody that they can discuss it with, and they've finally got somewhere that they can let it all out. When we say to people, have a good cry, you'll always feel better. Well, I don't think that I'm ever going to say to somebody, have a good cry, but spill the beans, get it out of your head, get it out onto a piece of paper. Talk to somebody who's not going to judge you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of judgment is there on debt because we have this philosophy that we should know how to deal with debt and we should not have ever got us into that place. And, like you said, Ray, I've sat across from people that have been drowning in debt. And, of course, then they feel overwhelmed. They're embarrassed to tell anybody. And it keeps them awake at night. It is every thought is every time they want to buy something, I've got this debt, though. And you can really see it really weighing them down. And, it takes over their whole life, which then ruins relationships because they're not present with their family because of the overwhelm. And so when I'm talking to people that are in debt, and it doesn't have to be overwhelming debt, it can be just anything. I have people when I was doing financial planning that had no debt other than their mortgage, but their biggest worry was, am I going to get rid of this debt before I retire? Because if I go into retirement with a mortgage, I've got nothing to spend because all of a sudden I don't have a wage anymore. So it's that I find people need the counselling on, is get it out on paper, get a strategy in place. Once it's out of your head and out onto a piece of paper, it is much more controllable, and you do have that sense that you can do what you need to do.
Okay, well, we're a little bit over half time. That's okay. We're here on Dollars and Making Sense, a weekly show about finance, money and investing. I'm your host, Ray Treverson, and with Jen Richardson. We are going to take a short break and be back with you in just a moment. Hi, and thank you for listening to Dollars and Making Sense, a weekly radio program about finance, money and investing on Radio Northern Beaches and nationally on the Community Radio Network around Australia. The views, comments and opinions aired during our program should not be construed or viewed as financial advice. Any commentary is general advice only and does not take into account your objectives, financial situation or needs. You should consider whether the advice is suitable for you and your personal circumstances. If in doubt, you should contact an authorised licensed financial planner. We welcome questions and feedback, and you can get in touch with us via our blog, social media channels or email. Please search for Dollars and Making Sense in your favourite podcast platform or check out our blog at otgcapital.com.au/blog. Hi, and welcome back to Dollars and Making Sense, a weekly show about finance, money, and investing. I'm your host, Ray Treverson. With me at the microphone this week and video is Jen Richardson. She runs her own money counselling practice up in the sunny Hunter Valley area, an area I used to live in when I was in the armed forces. An absolutely wonderful place. If you've never been, ladies and gentlemen, definitely go. It's a really, really pretty part of Australia. Now, look, before we went to the break, Jen, we were talking about, I guess, the headspace around debt and how it can take over. And I've seen it where it totally debilitates people and they end up being a gaggling mess in a corner, bubbling away and sobbing because they just don't even know where to start. So let's put the mind thing to one side now. Let's say we've dealt with that for a person. They've walked in and said, Jen, I really need some help. We put that mind stuff to one side now. What's the first step in your mind that you need to sit down with this person and say, okay, here's where we've got to start?
Yeah, so the first thing I always say is write it all down. Let's see where you actually sit, because sometimes that fear of they think they're worse than what they actually are. So write down every debt, what it's for. So what backs it. If it's a mortgage, it's your house that it backs. If it's a car loan, it's the car. Find out what balance you owe, what your minimum monthly repayment is, and what your interest rate is. So they are the 5 things that I get everybody to do. Now, once you actually see it in black and white, what you owe and what your interest rates and your minimum repayment is, you can put a strategy in place. And of course, there's 2 strategies. Well, there's actually 3, but there's the 2 that I always talk about with everybody is either the avalanche method or the snowball method. And that's a method to take control and pay something off. So depending on how you work, some people need to tick a box that they've got rid of one debt and you have that real momentum. And so we always get people to pay the absolute minimum on all the other loans and pick one to pay. So if it's the snowball method, you always pick the lowest debt to get rid of first. So you pay the minimum on every other loan and pay as much as you possibly can on that debt. Then once that one's gone, you move to the next lowest debt, et cetera, et cetera. The avalanche method would pay off regardless of the balance, but the one with the highest interest rate. Now, money and financial planning point of view, that is my favorite, because getting rid of any debt that's highest interest is the best one financially, but it's not everybody's.
Yeah, it's funny because I read your blog and I looked at it and went, well, a snowball, it's like, my view was always, and I advised the people that I was helping out and saying, always get rid of your most expensive money, because again, I'm trying to inculcate the concept that you are buying money. And they go, what do you mean? And it's a strange concept. I've explained this to my kids because they say, what do you do for a job, Dad? And I say, I buy and sell money. And when people borrow, they are negotiating a buy rate for money and what they're going to pay back. And so if you're trying to get out of debt, my view is always get rid of the most expensive money that's in that piece of paper. So
yeah, and that's my personal one as well, but that's not everybody's. And I think that's part of the process is we have to be able to adapt to what suits you and what keeps you motivated. And if ticking a box and going, I had 5 debts and this month I'm only going to have 4, and that keeps you motivated, go with it, because it's not, money is only part of the issue. The issue is changing your habits and your processes. And if the snowball method is the one that works for you, you'll find that the lowest debts, hopefully, is a lot of the time is the highest interest rate, because it'll be the credit card debt and things like that. Your mortgage or your investment properties are always going to be a low interest rate as well as the biggest debt.
And I think it's worth pointing out there's a very basic reason you highlighted, although we glossed over a little bit, things that have got collateral against them. So secured loans v unsecured loans. And ladies and gents, we've covered this on the show many, many times. But Jen, I'm sure you would talk to your clients when you're discussing this, things that have assets that back them, the interest rates are always lower, aren't they?
Correct. Yes. So the third one that I didn't talk about, I'll just briefly touch on it, is what we call consolidating your debt. Now, again, this isn't for everybody, because some people, when we do debt consolidation, will, go overboard. The key to debt consolidation is when you roll all your debts and refinance your home loan to package it in. We would always do, from a mortgage broking and financial planning point of view, I would always make it a split loan. So what a split loan is it's the one loan secured by your home, but one bit is the actual mortgage and the other loan still secured against your home if you've got the equity in your home, but it's sitting there so you can see that was all the other debts there. Now, the catch that most people have when they do debt consolidation is they go, great, I've now got this debt, it's only X amount of dollars. But if you're paying that over 25 or 30 years of your loan, even though the interest rate is lower, you will end up paying more in interest because the debt was there for longer. So what I always do when I work with people and we do the debt consolidation is I come up with a strategy and I say, right, we're now going to take advantage of this lower interest rate, but you need to pay that debt off in the same time frame that it was when it was at a crappy interest rate. So if it's a credit card, a personal loan or anything, it's got to get paid back in the 2 or 3 years that it would have stayed as in the old one, because otherwise you're going to pay more interest just because the debt is there for 25 years.
It's interesting you say that, because I saw somebody, it was my family member, that did exactly that. All of a sudden it was just like, oh, I've dodged a bullet, and away that person went and started spending all over again. I'm going, no, don't. I don't have to worry about it. I don't, and it actually ended up creating more problems that it solved. And I think you hit the nail on the head, because all of a sudden people have got, oh, okay, I'm off the hook. And by your method, that won't let them get off the hook, will it?
No, it doesn't. And so what that does is it goes, we'll deal with this debt here, not the mortgage. It'll sit over in its own little loan, but this other loan sits there, and you need to set a time frame. Remember at the start I said it's about planning. And so that's the planning process, is now how do I get rid of this 10, 15,000 or whatever it is in the same time frame that I would have? And that's where you get an advantage in life, because over that time frame, you're paying interest at, let's say, 6% instead of 18 or 19% that it would have been if it was credit card debt. But you need to, and by doing that, Ray, having it as a time frame and everything, you actually tie up a lot of the money to stop people going and spending again.
I did some very rough numbers, and even at current interest rates and credit card interest rates, and the way I've used this number just as a very rough estimate, but for every dollar you save, it costs you $25 in debt. It's a roughly 1 to 25 ratio. And that's why I keep on saying to people, if you do nothing else, first and foremost, get rid of that credit card debt, because that's the one that a lot of people don't even look at their card statements. I mean, the legislation has made it a lot more obvious, and the card companies have been forced now by government legislation to put repayment schedules at the back of the statement. But again, it ends up being the yada yada that people just breeze over and they don't see it. That's vitally important. And you've made some great points. So let's go through the next step. They've put everything on a piece of paper. How do you then help them get into a plan, given that we don't have a lot of time left in the show today, but let's put some rubber on the road on what people can do once they've written it all out.
Yeah, so once they've written it out, you come up with a strategy how you're going to do that. But the secret is that you need to look at your spending. And I don't care what anybody says when we do financial stuff. We'd all like to avoid looking at where we spend and, what we're wasting money on, and I'm not going to say wasting. I'm certainly not one of those people that go, get rid of your subscriptions, get rid of your gym membership, stop buying coffee. You'll always find everybody will be wasting money. Now, if your coffee is what gets you through the day, do it, because life is about living.
Totally
if you
agree.
want those subscriptions, I always say I reckon our family has every subscription possible. But, I've got 3 20-year-old boys living at home and, a husband, and we like different things. And that's important to us because we don't watch a lot of free-to-air TV. So once you've looked at your spending, you need to find savings, because the key to getting rid of debt, unfortunately, you've only got 2 options: increase your income or decrease your spending. That is it. There is no magic wand or anything, but people think and they want this all to happen naturally. It doesn't happen without you doing the homework. I'm not a budget person, don't get me wrong, because budgets will set you up for failure. But I do believe in creating systems around your money so that you can find that extra money. Now, if you can go and find $20, $30 a week, that then goes off the debt. Doesn't create something that you go, great, now we can have takeaway an extra night a week. So the systems, the procedures and everything is about getting control and getting there. And again, you've got to come back to what's the most important to you. Is it getting rid of that debt?
Yeah, I like what you're saying. And I think your bottom line of you've still got to live your life and enjoy it. We're just about out of time. One quick takeaway, Jen.
Takeaway is knowledge is power. Find out where you sit, because, I always use the analogy, a pilot, you go and get on a plane and you want to go to Greece. So you're going over to the Greek islands, you know what you've packed, you jump on the plane. The pilot gets in. If he hasn't got a plan, he doesn't know how much fuel he needs, he doesn't know the direction, he doesn't know where he's going to land. You need to be the pilot of your own financial well-being or your own financial future, whatever you want. Plan, and plan.
Great advice. Jen Richardson, thank you so kindly for being on Dollars and Making Sense. Always a pleasure. And until next time.
Thank you for having me. And hopefully it helped all your listeners and viewers.
I'm sure it will. Have a great day.
Thank you.